Welcome to AskPsychSessions with Marianne Lloyd, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you have a question or an idea for a conversation, please visit bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. That's bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. All one word, all lowercase. And here's our next question.
Thank you so much for joining us. Today, my guest is Dr. Vanessa Chan from the University of Notre Dame. Although, I wonder if I should be calling it the University of Notre Dame. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about your training and what you're teaching there.
Yeah, so officially it is the University of Notre Dame, and there's actually pretty strict saying it's called Notre Dame. But I actually at first, when I got this job and moved here, got a bunch of flack for saying Notre Dame to my Canadian colleagues. So I'm originally from just outside of Toronto, and I did my PhD at the University of Toronto in the Department of Psychology. And so people there grow up learning some amount of French. And so me coming here and saying Notre Dame kind of is a slag on all of my secondary school French education and the fact that I did my undergraduate in Montreal. So where there is lots of Notre Dame. So I'm very intentional in saying when I say Notre Dame, I'm talking about that university in Indiana and not anything else that's related to that.
Great. And tell us a little bit about what you were doing at Notre Dame. What are you teaching? What's your PhD area of specialty? Things like that.
Yeah, so I'm an assistant teaching professor at Notre Dame. My primary obligation is to teach. I teach for our psychology majors as well as our neuroscience and behavior majors. So my background is in cognitive neuroscience and specifically auditory cognitive neuroscience. So I've always been interested in sounds to various degrees. And so I did some work on what it's like to listen to people in noisy environments. What are some cognitive and neural correlates of that? And then I also have interests in music cognition. So how does our brain process music, which is sort of an interesting question that a lot of students kind of gravitate towards because they listen to music all the time.
Oh, great. And what courses are you teaching right now this semester
sorry.
as we're wrapping up? That's okay. It's a lot to hold in working memory. I should know better.
So I teach, currently I teach 6 courses. I teach cognitive psychology, introduction to cognitive neuroscience, and then I teach 2 upper-level seminars. One's called auditory cognition, so it's sort of general processes about how we group and understand sounds and then how we apply that to real-life settings. So the last couple of times I've taught this class, we've collaborated with a local organization called the Forever Learning Institute, which is basically a bunch of retirees teaching other retirees about various skills. And so we've actually brainstormed with them about what are situations that older adults who are hard of hearing, have age-related hearing loss face in the local community, and then what are some ways that the research that we've been reading informs how we should be accommodating or approaching these other situations. So that's one of my upper level seminars. My my second upper level seminar is music in the brain. So students explore aspects of music cognition from sort of the basic nitty gritty of what's pitch and how do we process it, all the way to does making music actually make us smarter? Spoiler alert, it probably doesn't. And so really thinking about those kinds of questions. And again, how is it applied to what we see in the local community? And then 2 new courses I'm teaching this year. One is sort of an introduction to EEG. So I used EEG in some of my graduate work, and we've been using these commercial headbands, like the Muse headband. It's 4 channels and running some simple experiments with that. And then my last class, which is sort of the most exploratory one, is what I call the arts, aesthetics, and creativity. So really an exploration into empirical aesthetics, mostly driven by the fact that I had an interest in it and wanted to learn more about it. And students also were super curious about it. So I was like, well, this is great. We'll learn together.
Great. What a fun collection of courses, right? And I think some of our listeners might even feel a little bit of envy because their programs can't offer such a variety of specialty topics too. So that's great that you're getting to, your cognitive neuroscience class. Yeah, I think a lot of us have that, but certainly, these specialty courses. So that sounds great. It sounds like if you like teaching, you're getting to do a variety of it in not just what the department tells you, but things that you're interested in too. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now I'm mulling ways I can make my classes more fun. So let's talk now about why I got in touch. It is because congratulations, you are a recent recipient of the STP's Instructional Resource Grants for 2023. And you...
Thank you.
You are welcome. That's great. You received a grant to do a project called Psychology for the Public, a project to foster good science communication. So understanding you just got this grant, so you probably haven't finished it. Maybe you haven't even seen it yet, right? I don't know how the funding rolls out. But would you tell us a little bit about the grant and maybe about what you're sort of already doing in this space for people that I think will be super interested in doing more outreach to the public?
Yeah, so this project really stemmed from some of my experiences as a grad student, being invited to sort of be a communications liaison on one of the conferences that was in the area. So we got to sit down with the Institute's media specialists, and she walked us through the process of press releases, talking to the news, bringing this information to the public. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. How come this isn't just part of our regular training? And so when I got to Notre Dame and I kind of had carte blanche to do a variety of different things, I said, well, I want to see if I can build some aspect of taking this like dense research out into the public in various ways. And so one of the projects that I first tinkered with was this, what I'm calling my media project. So students are either assigned or they pick an article that's related to a topic from the course, and then they read it. They have to write a press release on the article. So I have someone from media relations come in, explain what press releases are, some basics and examples of how to write it. And then students take their stab at writing the article. And I tell students, I know this seems very different from sitting down, writing exams, or writing sort of summaries of the research, but I hope you'll find that you really have to know the research in order to condense it and summarize it without all of like the methodological detail that you typically would be interested in. And then from there, students have to brainstorm, where would we see this research talked about in popular media? So, and that's audience dependent, right? So they think, okay, who would be interested in learning about this? So, for example, I had students read a study last semester on alcoholism and its effects on cognition. So that was one of the options that students could pick. And where would we see this information? So students came up with ideas such as, like maybe there would be like a brochure or a pamphlet at some Alcoholics Anonymous like gathering, or a doctor's office or something where in a healthcare setting or in an alcohol recovery setting, people would be talking about this research in the hopes that it gets outside of the peer-reviewed journal article sphere and into the hands of people who will use it. And so a number of my colleagues have already done this and done this kind of work before I even got here. And I wanted to say, well, we do this a lot in our upper level classes, but can we start this earlier? And so this is my attempt to scale up, introducing translational knowledge, scientific communication in some of our like larger classes.
That's great. And good job. I feel like this feels like a promotional for STP, right? I feel like there's been a lot of talk of this career readiness skills, different types of writing, right? That, a quiz on APA format maybe isn't as helpful as learning to write a press release, for example. So this sounds like a terrific project for people that might want to try to do this work. I love that you brought in someone from media relations at your university. Do you have any other sort of tips about where students get stuck, or where do they commonly, like you said, don't get mired in methodological details, right? So, it's like this, I find this teaching research methods, right? They want to tell me like how many people were in the study and where they came from. It's like, no, I don't want that in my intro, let alone in a press release. So what are some places where you see students getting stuck?
Yeah. One of the places that they get stuck is figuring out exactly what's too much detail, even in discussing the results. So, they might say they took all these different surveys and here's the names of the surveys. And I'm thinking anyone who's not another researcher probably doesn't care about the name of the survey or the questionnaire that you're administering. And so actually in the press release process, the first time around, I did find that people were introducing details. So the second time I did this project, I had students give the press release to me earlier. And I told them, look, I don't care how good it is at the first stage. This is your attempt to get something down on paper. And then the hope is that you realize how hard it is. And also you give me time to give you feedback on that. So I usually pretty heavily mark up the first press release with suggestions on, focus less on the methods and more on the impact, or what's the relevance of the results. Why would people want to know about this? And then I have them take it to someone who's not a psychology or neuroscience student and get them to read it. And I generally tell them the further away you can get from college educated, the better it's going to be, because these are the people that are really going to struggle reading something more dense. They're not going to know where to look. They're going to be relying on the news to tell them why this is important. And some people take that advice more seriously, and others don't as much. But it's interesting because students generally will say, oh, I didn't realize that this was a concept that is not talked about outside of this discipline that I've sort of entrenched myself in for the past couple of years. And that helps them because they realize I can't take for granted that people know what working memory is. I need to find a way to describe it to them. And that also makes them better at studying for it. If you have a way of explaining it to someone else, then you know that concept better than if you were just sort of memorizing what I have on my slides.
This is great, right? I love that they're getting metacognition from this. And I'm, of course, picturing, I'll admit I haven't been to visit South Bend for a while, but I'm just picturing your students like lined up at Menards asking people at the checkout line to read their stuff, right? So they're, that's great. Maybe we're right around 15 minutes, and I try to keep these episodes from 15 to 30. I do like to also ask guests if there's something they want to talk about, to share. And I'll leave that up to you. We're recording in late April, which is heavy grading season. So if you have any other exciting projects, because it also sounds like this doesn't sound terribly painful to grade, which I think is another sign, or something else about what you're teaching, something you were surprised students really love to learn about. The floor is yours, Vanessa.
So I'm actually really excited for my final class day on Tuesday, because students are going to be presenting their media clips on these projects. And previously I've gotten everything from like a series of TikToks to a fake TV interview, to podcasts, to Facebook posts, because, the parents use Facebook. And so you're targeting parents. And so it's fun to hear about that from students. And part of the grant is actually collecting like pre-post data on students' sort of perceptions of the project. And so I guess I'm kind of just excited to collect data about it. And I do find that like students are generally very proud of their work at the end of the semester. And so I'm kind of just really excited to sit back and enjoy all of the creativity that students come to these projects with. Because it's more exciting than, looking outside my window and realizing that it's rainy again. We got teased really hard with some nice weather, and then it went away. So these final projects that I do in all of my classes, I'm just excited to see the culmination of the students' efforts.
They will be the sunshine that the weather is not bringing.
Exactly.
Well, terrific. Thank you so much for your time. I have been talking today with Dr. Vanessa Chan from the University of Notre Dame. Listeners, did today's episode make you realize you have a question you would like someone to answer? I would be happy to take it into consideration and find a guest that can help. But what I need you to do is head over to our Google form at bit.ly/AskPsychSessions.